The Torah in our Siman in Reish Ches starts out the Maila of the Hey Mine Dagan, the Heilige Torah. He says these are the Zayin Midim Nishtabcha Eretz Yisrael, and therefore they got a special bracha Achrein al Kopanim. That's main shalish. There are two minim within this Zayin minim, which is of course Chita Saira, which branches out into the five minim, which is Kusmin, Shibal Shul, Shifain. That's the Chameshes Mine Dagan. They have a Maila Miuchedet, explains the Torah. Alechem Yichel Adam Zak the Heilige Torah. And this is something which is quite unique in Hilchos Brachos. This food, Dagan, has the potential of four brachas. On the one hand, if a person eats it in its flour state, it would be a shahako. Hasn't come to its fruition. If he eats it in its shleimistic state, Kleimar, I don't mean shleimus, its full state. I mean in the shalem of what it was noilad as what it was bashaft as, a piece of chita. A chita would be a barya priyadama, big suffix what the bracha achreina would be. If he goes and he processes it, either he cooks it or he bakes it in certain oifanim, it's a mezainis. But if it comes lidei lechem, the same exact piece of wheat, the same thing that started out, if he makes it into its final product, which is bread, then he would make, of course, a maitzi lechem in the arts. This is something that we find miyuchad about mezainistic products. Mezainis, when I say mezainis, I mean, of course, of the chameshes mine dagan, rice doesn't have that status. Based on that concept, explains over here the Paiskim, which we'll see more barichas. If you have food, we know the regular klalim of ikr v'tafel is you make a bracha on the ikr and you pray there's a tafel. Because one bracha is necessary, not more. But Mashen Kain, we understand that if you have a mezainis product, kloimar, a product that has in it mezainis, exactly what is that? We'll have to discuss. But that has such a chshivas. A chameshes mine dagan, sushi isn't going to help us over here. A chameshes mine dagan product is so important that even if it's not the roiv, it is always going to be considered the ikr, and that's the starting point of our sugya. That's the starting point that our Gemara brings down. The most one of the most famous statements in Gans Sech the Brachos, certainly in Ketzid Mevarchim, Rab Shmuel Amr Chavayu. That means that Rab Shmuel, they had machlekes.
Excuse me, before we get to the pictures of the pies, let's put the Gemara on, please. On page 4. We'll get to the pictures of the pies in a little bit later. Page 4. Sorry.
Rabbi Shmuel the Amri Chavayu, Kol sheyesh by mechameshes minei adagim mevarchin Allah boyrei minim ezaynis. And the Gemara says, Havamina mishum deisa be'en. Aval yidei taroivis loy. I would think that if it's a mixture of a mezainis product, this haste, like most of the cakes, a brownie, I would have thought a fudge brownie, which is 75, 80% sugar, eggs, chocolate, everything else. 20% is mezainis inside your fudge brownies or something like that. So I would have said that. That's a shahako. Of them zuk the heilige Gemara kamash milan kol sheyesh bay. And this Gemara repeats itself. In Brachos David Zayin Amid Beis Omarava, same type of a shaka v'tarya. Hayri hotta dechakloi the mafshi bei kimcho mevarach bei minazainis. My time at the smida eker.
Can we get to Gemara, please?
It seems to be the flour is the ikr. The mechuzah doesn't have so much, so therefore you make a shako. My time, because the honey is the ikr. The lekach, the honey cake is the ikr. Then Hadar Rava, even Rava was chayzer. Now it's Rav, it's Shmuel, it's Rava. Idi ve'idi boyrei minei mezainis, because the Omar Rav Shmuel kol sheyesh by mechameshes minei dagan boyrei minei mezainis. What's this incredible maila? Like we said, it's amazing. It gives strength to the person, nourishment to the person. Number one. Number two, it's Nishtabcha Eretz Yisrael. And that's the basic sugya. The Mishnah Berurah in Siman, also Kuf Samiches, in Sivkat and Memhei, also in Siman Reshit Beis. I think it's Sivkat and Vav. Mishnah Berurah discusses cases which are difficult. He discusses cases of where we understand that over here, when we talk about ikr v'tafel, conventional ikr v'tafel would have been something mamish arangamish, like the case of the Gemara. Cake is flour, it's sugar, it's chocolate, it's all mixed together. So the kai govna, I understand that there, even though it's only 20% flour, it takes on the ikr, that's the ikr food, and therefore you make on it a very minimum zaynis. But what if I have something that I could look at them as separate pieces? For example, I have an ice cream cake. I have a mezainis, the cookie part, and then I have ice cream, and then I have another mezainis, an ice cream sandwich, or I have a cracker with tuna, a cracker with cheese. Over here, the Mishabura, in a very, very startling statement, the Mishabura says over here, Mistabra, he doesn't show that same sakina chariva, that strength that the Mishabura has. He doesn't say with firm clarity. He says, Mistama, he says, you would probably, if you have two things that are mamish separate, you have a tuna and a cracker, and it's two separate things, we would probably don it as two separate items, and therefore you would make two brachos. Mishabura says it's not clear. Mishabura seems to say you need the cooking to put it together. One can declare in a Mitzvah Hashem, one day we will, an ice cream sandwich. There, it's not exactly like a cracker and tuna, which is two separate things. So we don't have to say you're the ikr and you're the tafel. In essence, when you have a tuna and a cracker, it's you're the ikr, they're both ikrs. Therefore, it's mistaber, you make two brachos. A machain cane, or a cracker and herring. Okay, assuming it's a cracker that you want. But if you have something like an ice cream sandwich, Mali, if the cooking process puts it as one, Mali, if you freeze it and it becomes one, maybe that's also going to be a bari minimum zaynis. This we'll have to see and we'll have to clear. But that's the basic sugya. That's the basic sugya. And over here, there are chedushim. Comes again the Shulchan Aruch and Sif Gimel. I'll read you the Shulchan Aruch. Actually, before I read you the Shulchan Aruch, I'll read you a Gemara. Because over here, it would seem to us that anytime I have a flour, mezainis together, mezainis is the ikr, and that's it. Mezainis takes over. Comes again, the Gemara in Brachos Daf Lamed Tes, Omar Rav Ashi. And he says, Ki avinam bei Rav Kahana, when we were by Rav Kahana, he would tell us, Omar Lon.
Prostatitis dermaskin.
Omar Lon. Tavshila de silka de loy mavshi bei kimcha. If you have some type of a tavshil that doesn't have kemach, it's a very priadam. The lifta, the mavshi that has a lot of kemach, and not a lot, has kemach, that's enough. Very minimum zaynis. Okay? Hodar amar, this makes sense to us. Kol sheyesh ba mechameshes mina dagam. So you make on it a very minimum zaynis. Hodar amar, then he was chayzer. Edi ve'edi, boy rei priadam. Now, what's this? This breaks the rules. Is he being chaylik on Rav Shmuel? Not mistaber. Comes again the Gemara and says, "I deshadi bekimcha." The reason why you're putting in flour is lidvuki be'alma. You're just trying to get it to stick together. You have over here some type of a dish, flour. In addition to its satiating, koiches, its nourishment. In addition to the taste that it gives, in addition to the yichya adam that it gives, it could also be used as glue. We know that half of Hilchos Pesach is talking about the flours that were glue-based. So you could use the flour in your food to glue it together. And then it's not being used as food. Once it's not being used as food, it doesn't have the status of a kol sheyesh bo. It doesn't have that chashivas of kol sheyesh bo mechameshes min dagan. The chashivas of kol sheyesh bo mechameshes min dagan is when it's being done for the purpose of nourishment, for the purpose of taste, nourishment, etc. But if it's being done as a glue ba'alma, so then the glue is not food. You're using food as a glue. It's a chiddush. It's a chiddush. It's going to give the nourishment, but mitzias, you're going to be nourished. And like we're seeing over here, perhaps licorice is an example. We'll see that's a very, very controversial example. We'll talk about it in a moment. But al kapanim, it's there to stick it together. And that's why in licorice, there is a lot of kemach, because it has to be, as you see, licorice is very strong and very stark. Al kapanim, this is what it says in the Gemara and the Shulchan Aruch. Paskins like that. Okay, the Gimel. I guess you see where the lave is. Base. So it says the Shulchan Aruch, Simin Reish Ches, Sif Beis. Sagt der Rebbe, Meishes Mini Dagan, Shishalkan, Kachon. I mean, Sifal, we did. Achameshes minim. You make a gap and taina remind dice tomorrow. You have to make after them a main challenge. Chameshes minim Dagan shalkon. Kachon asamem tavshel is a ma'isa kedera. Over there, even if you put in a lot of tavash. Now, this sugya, Rabbi say, at what point is the break-off point between it being an adama and it being a mezainis? At what point is it called processed? What's the din of granola bars, etc.? Netz Hashem, pearled barley, that's coming in Netz Hashem when we learn Siv Dalet. To compare Siv Dalet to Siv Bey, that's a sugya coming up. And let's say you cook a whole barley grain and it's not broken up. So it depends if it's cooked and it got broken in the cooking process, if it sticks together. It's all gone to Torahs and Netz Hashem. We will learn this. What about a granola bar, which seems to be a bunch of pieces of wheat, which is stuck together? Some of us remember we grew up in America, you made a Zionist. Now a lot of people make Adama. We have to see what this is all about, Bezos Hashem. And Al Kapanim, Shulchan Aruch goes on with Negea us and says, even in whatever dish you're talking about, a Zionist dish, once it's Zionist, it's been processed. And even if you put in a lot of honey, even more, 59%, 75% honey, or other things, still you make a Zionist and an alamechia. But if you didn't put the Dagan Matavshel ela lidavkoi, if you put it in there just for gluing, so then ulak faisai, or to thicken it up, then the bracha, then it's bottled to the tavshel, and then that is just a glue ba'alma, and therefore the bracha would be whatever the tavshel is. Shulchan Aruch continues, Siv Gimel, nice thing kemach l'toich shkedim, you put kemach, okay, this is, in Eretz Yisrael, they're called American nuts, botanim Amerikayim, where I grew up, they were called beer nuts. But you take nuts and you glaze them with some type of a flour. So over there, they didn't do it for healthy people in the bar. They did it for chaylim. If you're doing it yisoid halev, if you're doing it to give nourishment, the you want it to have the taste, the nourishment, to fill you up, that's a barimin zaynis. But if you did it just to glue it together, that doesn't fall apart, barimin zaynis. Okay, and the Shulchan Aruch goes on and discusses this. And this Rabbi Yitzai is the starting point of the sugya. The Shulchan Aruch says, number one, if it's in there for the purpose of soyed halev, for the purpose of satiating, that's a very minimum sinus. The Shulchan Aruch says if it's there for gluing, then it doesn't have the klal of kol sheyesh bai. Therefore, kipshutai, that person has a simple, some gefilte fish. Sometimes they put a little flour in. That's why, on Pesach, the gefilte fish costs 17 times the price, because it's lacking the glue, if you can figure that one out. Mashen Kain, if you're putting it in to satiate, then it would be a mezainis. Meatballs, sometimes people put in flour a little bit to, just to glue it together, to give it to be able to stick together. So then what bracha do you make? If the flour is being put in l'dvuke, it's a shakal nibadvarai, or whatever that food is. What about if I put it in for the purpose of a smell? I want it to smell good. I'm putting in flour for a smell. So the Heilige Rambam, and this is brought down in Siman Reish Daled Sif Yud Beis. Shulchan Aruch assumes that you already learned Reish Daled if you learned Yud Ches. He doesn't assume you're going in order of the Gemara, I guess. And says here, Kol Shu Iker V'Imay Tfela Mevarach Ala Iker Paiter Satfela. That's pretty known to us. The Kol Dover Sheme'arvin Oisoi Lidabek Oy Reyach Oy Litzboya Hatavshel Arezu Tfela. So here's the Klal Gadol from the Hilchos Rambam, that this is another example of glue. Glue is an example of when I take something and I'm using it not for the purpose of food content. Kloimar, satiating. What's the quintessential dogma of the Gemara? Gluing. Says the Rambam. I have other examples. Now, I don't know how this will stem with Rav Avigdor Miller, Zechron Lefracha, and all of his Gewaltige Shmuzim. But the purpose of food is not to give the smell kanira. So if you're putting in flour for the smell, for the sake of smell, that doesn't get that chashivas that could make the mezainis into an ikar. Another case, says the Heilige Rambam, like you just saw. Let's say I'm putting in the flour, not for the purpose of the smell, but I'm also not putting it in to satiate. I'm putting it in for the purpose of color. I don't know what the case would be when it comes to mezainis, but the Heilige Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch over there, the Aruch HaShulchan over there, They all say, then that would be the same status as Ledvuki, and it wouldn't have that chashivas that would give the bracha of mezainis. It would also be, let's say, it was in a honey cake, I don't know what, and it's giving it a smell, you make a shackle. What about texture? What about texture? I'm putting in flour for what purpose? I'm putting in flour for the purpose of that it should be soft, or I'm putting in flour for the purpose of being hard. It's very interesting. Here,
Rav, give an example of a food that is that way.
An example. So the Chutshani in Brachos Yivkot Lamed Gimel, that's page 206. Crunch, I'm going to talk about in one moment. He says like this. He says, and this is really based on an Avnei Nezer, which we're going to discuss in a moment. This Avnei Nezer in Simin Lamed Ches, Ois Beis, you can learn from over here. First of all, besides the Avnei Nezer's goyiness, but you could learn that he had a big relationship with his mother. When he had child's in halacha, he went to discuss it. He had to discuss the mitzias. He went to discuss it with the cook. So over here he says, I discussed it with the mama. The mama was, if I'm not mistaken, the Agudas Ezav's wife. If it's the Avnei Nezer, so it's the Agudas Ezav's wife. Over here the Chutshani says, Im kavanatzai rak l'rachik, to soften the meichel, right? Shea yoiser harech b'lisiyasai. It should be easier to crunch and to chew. Or hafuch, that it should be kashiach, it should be stronger, starker. He doesn't really care. He says, then it doesn't have the chashivas of a chameshes minei dagan. That's what the Chutshani says. Now, I must tell you, when I was a bacher, I was once standing by Rav Pam, Zichron Levracha, and I don't remember who. Somebody, Kanira Chashiv, he was looked like Chashiv Yid. He asked Rav Pam a certain question, which I'll mention maybe later, but right now I want to bring out the point. And he asked Rav Pam that the mezainis is only put into that item, whichever item we're talking about, for the purpose of the crunch. That was what he told Rav Pam. Rav Pam was there, and he said, crunch is oichet a tam. Crunch is also a taste. Crunch is also. I wonder if that's not like the Chutshani. I wonder if that's not like this Avnei Nezer. I'm not sure, because maybe they're talking about that there's no. I know that it's taka stira, not stira. I mean, it would be arguing and klaimar. A flour product, one of the qualities of flour is its ability to make the food go down better. When it crunches, it's better, or when it is softer, it'll be better, or harder, whatever the purpose is the person's interested in. But that already we'll see, Mitzvah Shem, as we come back to it, possibly different examples. Right now, I would assume that it means crunch, that you're putting in a flour because you want the purpose of the crunch. If that's the case, then now we'll see, Mitzvah Shem, that is debatable, as we say. Next, Avnei Nezer over there in Siman Lamed Ches, the previously quoted Avnei Nezer, he says, what if I'm putting it in lahagadil, the amount? I'm putting it in so that I should have more of the, instead of having meatballs that are this big, I have meatballs that are this big if I put in flour. I'm not doing it for the nourishment. Listen closely. He's not doing it to fill up. But he's doing it should be bigger, more balabatish, it should look nicer, maybe with the gefilte fish balls. He's doing it to look bigger, and to look nicer. Over here also, the Chutshani is on page 205, and it's also the Avnei Nezer. And he says, if that is the reason you're doing it, then it's like crunch. It's not, that's not a taste. That's not satiating. That's not a mila. Kloima, I guess he means, if you would have glue and you could put it in, you'd put glue in. Come on, if you have some other thing that would give the smell, you'd put something else in. And if you have something else to thicken it, you have air, you would put that in. So flour doesn't have that mila unless it's doing something in the world of food that I could only do because it's flour. Only do because it's flour. There's something about the flour per se. Okay. And this Lamaisa, the shal is how you read over here. I must tell you, there's a bear hativ over here in Sivkat Gimel. He brings down a taz. I read you what he brings. Ein lahakal b'kach kevan sheyesh lo hanocha shuva al kopanim mitzad haribui.
Okay, is that the taz?
I think that line sounds not like that's a taz. I think that the Berheta brings it down in Sivkat Gimel. I think that line sounds not like the Avnei Nezer, right? And I don't know. To me, it sounds like he's saying that once you're putting it in there for the reboy, but again, it's not muchach. Maybe it means, maybe it doesn't mean that you're putting it there that it should be bigger. maybe means that you're putting it in there that you should have more. And what happens when you have more? You'll become full. And that, of course, is there for the satiating purposes. For example, that's pashit, that if you have, nothing's pashit, but let's say you have a yeshiva and the cook is making meatballs and they're putting in a lot of flour. And why are they putting a lot of flour? Because the yeshiva said, put in a lot of flour because we don't have enough meat. And we're doing it to fill them up. That's mamash sugya. That's kol sheyesh by mechamesh mine dagim. It's being put in there for the purpose of filling them up. And l'chayra, that's a very good example of something, which is getting the satiating quality and mila of mezainis. So over here, that's maybe what the Taz means. And that's maybe what the Ber Hativ means. That when you're putting it in so that you should have more, more, so that you should be satiated, and that you should have it for that purpose. Mashenkin, if you're putting it in for the purpose of just looking bigger, looking nicer, which apparently that's why the Avnei Nezer's mother put it in. So then that itself would not get a mezainis. That would be like glue. That would be just like an air bubble. That's l'chayra, I would say, everything I said till now, I think is pretty pashit. It's pretty pashit. Kloimar, if it's being put in there for satiating, lisoid alev, to fill you up, to be amazing, vaday it's a mezainis, even if it's 15%. And mashain kain, if it's being put in for glue, and glue is a very broad category, it means something which isn't a food quality per se that I require this food for. I got to put food in my thing because I can't eat glue and I can't eat, today we have food coloring. So he would use food coloring. Today he could put on it some type of an air spritz. He would put that for the smell. So too, if he could make it bigger and it would look nice and chashiv, so then he doesn't dafka need flour for it. So therefore the flour wouldn't have that benefit. It wouldn't get the mila. The one thing, if he's putting it in to be bigger simply for cared because he wants to have something which is going to fill him up, then l'chayr on that, he would make a mezainis. That's adkan what I think is pashit. The controversy starts when it comes to schnitzel. What's the shaila? Before we don schnitzel, let's don first in the sugya and see that l'chayr it's very hard to understand what exactly the controversy is. Now, lemaisa, excuse me, because this shaila of schnitzel in Eretz Yisrael, for example, is not just schnitzel. For those that don't know, is breaded chicken in Eretz Yisrael, and it's not just breaded schnitzel chicken. In Eretz Yisrael, you have all these soy things, fish things, corn schnitzels. I mean, this is a way of life. What bracha do you make on that? Do you make a mezainis, or do you make, let's say it's corn, you make adama? If it's chicken, you make a shahakel. What's the bracha on a schnitzel? I mean, there's no shaila that the helik of a shefer of bashaf in a schnitzel, because his mamish schnitzel was made koydem brias oilam. Because schnitzel, there has been so much Torah that has been said over schnitzel that it is definitely something which preempted the ganze Welt. And the chayra, yesh lachkor, we understand that glue isn't a reason to warrant the mezainis, and color isn't, and size maybe isn't. But what about taste? Chayra, the schnitzel, everyone likes the chicken together with the breading. That's breaded chicken and fried chicken, and the taste is gishmak. Everyone likes that. Everyone who likes the taste, but whoever likes that taste, that's what they want. They want breaded chicken. So the mela l'chayr, it's there for taste. What's the din if the mezainis is being put there for taste? Now here also, it's not doima to an ice cream sandwich, which I still am noite as a mezainis, and it's certainly not doima to a cracker and tuna, because here it's mamish cooked together, and that's the whole vort. That's what gives it the taste. So what's the din when mezainis is put on to another product for taste? Maybe you'll say it's not there for satiating. Maybe. It happens to be. I'm not convinced. Everybody knows when you have a chicken cutlet, so then a plain chicken cutlet does not fill you up as much as a schnitzel. So why we have to don the shaila, I'm not 100% sure. L'chayra, the breading is there also to satiate, and she gets a lev. But we'll don the shaila kedarka shel Torah, and let's assume that it's being put there just for a tam. What's the din of a mezainis which is being put there just for tam and doesn't satiate? Which again, I don't fully understand why we have to don it, but we'll don it nonetheless. So the chayra, there's a meiri. This meiri is the answer to our shaila. The Miriam Brachos and Daf Lamed Zayin Amud Aleph. Avalim Iker Atavshel Midvar Macherim. Let's say the Iker Tavshel is something else, like chicken. Umachnisim by Kemach Harbe, and you put lots of flour on it. Now, Agav, it doesn't say on it. It says Machnis boy Kemach Harbe. And Lashon is Lematek es hatam, to give it a good time, or to make it thicker. He compares thickening to giving tam. Oh, so we know already what's the din of thickening. Thickening is like glue. So he says, in such a case, you would make a shackle. So then, Eina Kemach Kloimar, he's taking on, when is it that Rav and Shmuel said their statement of Kol Sheyesh Bo Mechameshes Minei Dagan? The only time that they said their statement of Kol Sheyesh Bo Mechameshes Minei Dagan is when it comes to something which is satiating and nourishing, but not when it's something like a time giving. A time giving is like glue. Now, the truth is, the way we explained glue and the way we explained color and reyach and thickness, it is extremely difficult to understand this Meiri. Glue and all those other things were one purpose, the purpose of giving a non-food quality that you're stuck and you're going to use flour. That's the food that you're going to use for this purpose. But theoretically, you could use something else. But if I want tam, the thing that gives the tam is obviously the mezainis. I cannot get a schnitzel tam from something else. Everybody knows, the cornflake schnitzel is a whole different tam. It's a different tam than the schnitzel. So obviously he's doing it for tam. And if he's doing it for tam, he's doing it for the quality that lies within the flour itself, within the mezainis product. But the Meiri says it, and the Meiri is one of the Rishayim. So it's game over. We have the answer to our shaila. When I have a schnitzel, so if you tell me, like I thought originally, that when you're making the schnitzel, you're doing it because it also nourishes, it also fills you up. Everybody knows in the yeshivas, the boys are more fill on schnitzel day. So if that's the case, it's pasha de mezainis. For whatever reason, I don't know why, but the achreinim dan the shaila, maybe they have different schnitzels than I showed you in the beginning of this year. But for whatever reason, they dan the shaila, they were donning that, no, it's being given for taste. So now, okay, so it's being given the taste. We have Mefurish Meiri and L'chaira. It's the end of the story. Because once you have a Mefurish Rishon about the Shaila, L'chaira, that's the end of the story. The only thing is, Rabbi Yisai, is that the Rashba in Brachos Daf Lamed Zayin Beis, which as everybody understands, is a more of the mainstream Makubal Rishonim that the Beis Yosef himself brings. Over here in our Siman, in Siv Katan Beis, and it's brought in the Mishnah Berurah, in Siv Katan Zayin, and in the Sharatzi in Siv Katan Yud Beis, where the Rashba says, this is how the Rashba learns the Gemara. The Rashba learns that the Gemara is not talking about where the Mezainis is being given lissaid, nourishment, satiating. The purpose of the mezainis, says the Hilchos Rashba, and I quote, Dov she'ikar pirish roiv dvash mi'it soilet. You're talking about 20% flour and 80% chocolate, honey, whatever. Ikroi dov shah, even if the ikar is the dvash. Solsai, and why are you putting the soilet, the flour? Lehat imoy, to give the taste to the food. Says the Rashba, Mikol Makoim, that's how he learns the pshat in the Gemara. That's the case, according to the Rashba, is that the flour was put in not to satiate, not to nourish, to give taste. This case, mamish. So then the bracha is like Rabbi Shmuel, Mezainis. And Rabbi Yisai, this is the Beis Yosef brings, this the Mogen Avram brings, and this is the Mishnah Berurah. You want to know the answer to the Shaila, what's the din of Schnitzel? That's a Mishnah Berurah. Mishnah Berurah says, Hu ba lahatim ulahachshir. Says the Shartzian, Rashba. Why does he bring down so much of Machlekes, Rashba? It's against the Meiri. The Teretz is Rabbi Yisai, it's not really just a Rashba. It's a Shulchan Aruch. And really it's a Rambam, Rabbi Yisai. Because the Rambam only could find one example of something which isn't being given for the purpose of a mezainis quality, glue, or color, or smell. External types of concepts klape eating. Why didn't the Rambam say a very simple thing? Tam. The most normal case, Rabbi Yisai, he's putting in the flour for tam, and he's not putting it in to satiate. Obviously, because the Rambam held that that's included in the Chiddush of Rabbi Shmuel, Kol sheyesh bo chameshes minei Dagan, except for one thing. What's what? Glue, or a glue type quality. And this is why Rabbi Yisai, that you have to know What I'm saying is, we'll see in the whole sugya, and we'll see what the Achrayim say, but you have to know the pashtus. When one learns the sugya inside Brachos Lamed Vav, Brachos Daf Lamed Zayin, Brachos Daf Lamed Tes, the Shulchan Aruch Reish Ches, Sif Beis, Sif Gimel, Reish Dalet, Sif Yud Beis, Siman Reish Yud Beis, the pashtus everywhere in the Mishnah Berurah, in the Magen Avraham, in the Shulchan Aruch, in the Poskim, in the Rishonim, is that mezainis quality is not just it's satiating, a mezainis that is giving off a taste. The bracha is going to be mezainis yiyeh mashiyeh, which means that if somebody would stop the sugya here, there's no shaila that the schnitzel is a mezainis. Number one, I think it's being given to satiate. Number two, it's pashit that it's being given for a tam. It's also given for a tam, and a tam is enough of a reason that even though you're only 20% to 30%, that should make a very minimum mezainis. So therefore, let's be this, schnitzel's a mezainis. I see a lot of Achrayim discuss this. For example, the Shulchan Levi in Chelik Aleph, Perek Gimel, Oisi Dal, Tzif Katan Hey, he writes a svara, B'makim sheyesh ikar borer hakaveas hamaychel al shmai. Let's say you have something that's clear 100% what this thing is. So then for sure, the mezainis is tafel to it. And one would assume, I guess that's his example. His example, is probably going to be schnitzel, right? Number one, I don't know what the raya is. Number one, anybody that reads the Rashba is absolutely not going to know that. Anyone that reads the Shulchan Aruch is absolutely not going to know that. Anyone that reads the Magen Avraham and the Mishnah Berurah is absolutely not going to know that. They say once it's given for tam, it's a mezainis. They don't make these types of chilukim. And I'll say more. Even if one would want to make such a chiluk and say, well, if something is clear, I mean, come on, that's a meatball or that's a fish or something. But by schnitzel, by say, over here in Eretz Yisrael, it has a whole different name. One is chicken, right? You go to a chasana and you would say off and you would say schnitzel. It's two totally different things. So it's not even true. You see, it got a whole different name, Rabbi Isai. Breaded chicken. So you're going to say, no, it's really chicken. It's just breaded chicken. No, it's basically when a person has chicken and it has teriyaki sauce, or he has chicken and it has that type of mustard sauce. So he says, it's chicken with a mustard flavor. It's chicken with this. Breaded chicken is a schnitzel. It's a concept, Rabbi Isai. And therefore, by me, it's pashit that the Mishnah Berurah, even if you would agree with that svar, which in the Mishnah Berurah does not sound like that, but a schnitzel is clearly going to be a mezainis because it's a whole different chefza. And this Abaisai is definitely the pashtus. L'mashal, you look around for example, when the Pais can discuss meatballs and discuss gefilte fish, like I mentioned before, I'm being asked about an ala michyon schnitzel. It's a very simple thing. It depends if there's enough breading there that you ate within a kedei achilas pras. If the answer is yes, if you have to have enough breading that which is not that much. If you have that breading and you could put it into a matchbox and you eat it within a 2-minute span or a 3-minute span or whatever kedei achilas process, then yes, you would make an ala mechia, and that's the bracha achrayna. If not, it would be like any time that we say that when you have a mezainis product together with a shahakol product, so then you would make a bar nefashis. Now, Davnei Nezer, Lamaisa, in Lamed Chetzos Beis, he talks about a meatball, and he says over there that the bracha is taka shahakol. But again, it's a Messias taka shaila. He was talking about a meatball that they were pumping it up. If they were doing it for the purpose of satiating, it's a different story probably. Okay, and the Be'er Moshe Taka says that in Chelik Heisim and Tzanch Beis and Orlasi and Chelik Beis Perek Yudal Leisites. He says im noisnam, if you put in flour less bia, oy kedei losei tam, or if you're putting it in for taste in the meatballs, he says you would even make on a meatball a very minimum zaynis. In the Chuvas Anhagis from Moshe Sternbach Chelik Aleph Kopei Aleph, he says in restaurants they put in there. And their purpose is to fill you up. Now, I just don't know if that's the Metzias. Moshe Sternbach wrote this many, many years ago. I don't know if that's the Metzias today. They have the Nezer in Arachaim Siman Lameches. Hakavana be'ira v'lechem Amrli shukadei ladabik. It's to glue together the meat. Ve'imi, my mother, Amrli akavar gamkein nafek rav. My mother also said it's there that it should be bigger, and he understood bigger in this case means it's not there to fill you up. It's there just for the size. It's there just for the size. There's a sefer called the Mishnah Arucha. Rechaim Kanievsky said, there's a shmua from my uncle, the Chazon Ish, that they asked him about fish in the yeshiva and gefilte fish. and they put inside of it flour, and that my uncle, the Chazon Ish, said that the bracha on gefilte fish is a shahakol. And even if they put it in there for the reason of tam or the reason of satiating, he said, Abbas is fort fish. It's lemaisa fish. Chaim Kanievsky said, this shmua is incorrect. HaChazon Ish amar gefilte fish. The Chazon Ish said, if in gefilte fish, if it's putting in for tam, and I'll add, or for satiating, yesh levarach mezainis. If it's ledabek, if it sticks it together, shahakol. That's it. Falafel, the Or Letzion, he writes in Chelik Beis, Perik Yidal, Test, he says, today, Roiv Kadure a falafel, most of the falafels that are sold are boirei minei mezainis. Now, I checked around, this was written 30 years ago, it seems to be that's not the Metzias. In his time, it seems to be they were putting in a tremendous amount of flour, and they're trying to fill you up with that flour. Today, even if they're putting in flour, they're just trying to make him bigger, and they're not trying to make you filled with it. HaRav, they want you to buy more. Now, what's Tachlis Schnitzel? Did anybody talk about Schnitzel before our door? So the Piskei Rid and the Piskei Riyaz in Brachos Daf Lamed Zayin and Beis, Omar Rava Hai Riyota. It's talking about this sugya. Mehachi Shaminam. From here we say Mulyasa Nefais Betaner. That's some type of a mulyaisa means something that's filled. Mibaser I dagim I gvina. Afagav the buster the dagim the gvina ikar. Sounds like a schnitzel to me, Rabbi Yisai. Mevarchin amoitzi lechem in haaretz. He's talking about where you put in it more of a. We'll see that actually a different time in Kuf Samech. They had some type of a bareka or something of that sort. The basar chameshes minaz linan, the loy basar, the basar and the dagim. The gvina. Now this is a hard thing to read because no matter what, once there's hamoitzi, of course hamoitzi is going to be the ikar bracha. So that line we're going to leave. But then he goes on, he says, so I must tell you, it's hard to read. But when you read it inside the Ugar writes, he says, yeah, I'm gonna leave it. I'm gonna leave it because I want to get back to it. 1 minute. But halacha l'maisa, what do the poskim of today say about? So the Or Letzion, that tshuva there, Chelik Beis, Perik Yidal, Test. He says, if you're doing it because you want to stick it together, or there seemed to have been some type of metzias that they were putting in flour so that the schnitzel should not stick to the frying pan. So he says, then avada, it's being used as an oil, then it's a shakal. He says, but if it's given for svia or for taste bilvad, he says, pashit, you make a brayman with zainis. The Chachani says this in page 205. He says, Chaim Kanievsky is brought down in countless svarim that he said over that a schnitzel is mezainis. I read you from the Sefer Brachos Hilchos on page 139. Schnitzel is mate mikemach ma'berchosai in zanitan latam. If it's for taste, it's a mezainis. But if it's not, I don't need that. It should be the ikar tam. On the buzzer, on the meat, you don't make a bracha. It's batal. So it seemed like it's quite clear from the Paiskim that it's a mezainis, quite clear from the Mishabura, and quite clear. What's the pshat in the Minig Olam that a lot of people make on a schnitzel a shahakal? It seems to be neged the sugya and neged the Paiskim. Now there are conflicting shitas in the Shpetadik Achrayim, later Achrayim, about what is the bracha. Digris Maisha, in the Torah of Vayra and Chelekei, in page 21, they bring down, the Moshe said that dogim shikarin flounder, or basin shikarin cutlets. Bein anase mi basa beima, a chicken or this or that. They fry it in kemach, you make a shakal. And the tzipui, the outer coating, afilu mimine dagan, even if it's min dagan, afilu neisin tam, einay ella lahatim, it's only there to give tam ulahakal achanasan, and to enable you to prepare it. Now, by side, two extremes over here. If it's there just to be making it, I understand it's preventing it from burning. So then I hear that's glue or that's not. But he says, or it's being eina ela lahatim achilasan, to make it easier to eat. So I looked around. This Ramosha is Ramosha's Ramosha. If Ramosha says Schnitzel's Mezainis, then that's it. But Ramosha in the river of Ephraim and Chelik Gimel Simukukha Beis, he writes over there that I heard from Rav Shmuel first in Chicago. Amarli Ramosha Feinstein Shlita Shemnita Natzipa Kedei Litein Tam. If it's there for the purpose of taste, as Mevarech Boirei Mina Mezainis. The like Moshe Nidpas B'Shmoi B'Kuntras Anal. So now you have conflicting opinions in Rav Moshe, and I guess when you have conflicting opinions, if Rav Moshe said it's a Mezainis, or if Rav Moshe said that it's a Shakal, so either you'll say that Safek, and therefore we'll go with the Pashtus that it's a Mezainis, or you'll say that Rav Moshe is talking about a different type of schnitzel, which is what it does seem like over there. Rav Moshe seems like he was talking about a flour that maybe it was a very little amount, and maybe it was there just to make sure that it seems they were putting on in those days flour to make sure that it didn't burn the frying pan. Some type of mitzias, which is 1,000% not the reason why they're putting on the flour today on the mezainis. So therefore, Rav Moshe, we don't know where Rav Moshe held. We definitely could remain with the pashtus that Schnitzel's mezainis. The Amos Yankiv, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zechron of the Bracha, again, a sefer that he didn't write, but it's brought down b'Shmai in the 214th Ara, Dagan Basar, which is mitzupa, which is layered with breading, is a shahakal. And av shehemina dagam aren't batal, I kol sheyesh by. But the tzipoi eina nitin latam. It's not there to give a tam, atzma. It's not there to give its own tam. Rak lehatim adag. It's there to be like a spice. It's not there to be a tam. It's only there to be a spice for something else. Okay? So if it's there to be a spice for something else, so then therefore, the Brachos Shakal. Now, again, that's a tremendous chiddush, which anybody reading the Mishnah Berurah is not going to know. Rabbi Yankiv is grace. The only thing I can tell you is that in the next line of the Emes Yankiv, he said, Michael, that's called licorice, is a shahakal. Well, we'll hold off on licorice, but he said licorice is shahakal, which we all know. So it does seem to be there's a shmua from Rabbi Yankiv, Zechron of the Bracha. But again, even if you'll go with Rabbi Yankiv, which is a chiddush, anybody reading the Mishnah Berurah is certainly not going to know this. You read the Mishnah Berurah, it says, Hu ba lahatim es hatavshel. And Rabbi Yankiv says that the reason why schnitzel is shakal is because it's rak lahatim hadag. Those are the words the Mishnah Berurah said are a reason to yes be a mezainis. And Rabbi Yankiv says, since it's only being lahatim, therefore it's not a mezainis. I don't know how to read the Mishnah Berurah. This is something said from Rabbi Yankiv, b'shem the Mishnah Berurah. It said b'shem Rabbi Yankiv. I know a different Rabbi Yankiv in the Sefer Emes Yankiv, where he writes, anything that you'll hear from me, not in Sefer Emes Yankiv, different Sefer actually, anything that you'll hear from me, which is not like the Mishnah Berurah, it means I didn't say. So I think this would be a good example of something that it clearly exact mila b'mila against the Mishnah Berurah. The Mishnah Berurah says that the mezainis is lahatim the dag, and therefore it's a mezainis. And Rabbi Yankiv is quoted as saying the mezainis is there lahatim as a dag, and therefore it's a shakal. So we'll go with the Mishnah Berurah. And the truth is that the only sefer that I saw that says a different mahalach, and that maybe you could say is a chiddush, and it's not the negative Mishnah Berurah, is the Shevet Levi in Chelik Daled Siman Kuf Tamach Aleph. Over there he talks about schnitzel, and he's machadish a chiddush. He says over there that schnitzel is taka shahakal. He says it's just glue ba'alma. Sorry, it's not just glue ba'alma. It's litein tam. It's giving taste. So maybe you should make a mezainis. So he says that Masha'imim, excuse me. He says that when a person is eating a schnitzel, he's eating chicken, and the mezainis came that type of, as far as we said before, he's eating chicken. And in order to get the chicken down, he's also eating that. Let me give you an example of this. We're going to see later on in Brachos and Daf Mem Daled that one of the Iker V'Tofel examples is that a person's eating fish, and it's a very spicy fish and a very strong fish, and he eats the bread after the fish just to get the fish down. He's eating fish, but he's eating the bread just to get the fish down. So that everyone agrees. You only make a shackle and you don't make a bracha on the mezainis. What happened to kol sheyesh by mechamishes mina dagan? So the answer is, says mean, that's the pashtus. The Gra learns that is the idea of devek. That's the idea of glue. You're just getting it down like it's a water. It's like a bridge just to get it in there. Now, if that's the svara, maybe someone can come along and say, okay, who didn't schnitzel? It's the chicken, and I'm just getting it down. I tried to say this svara, but I don't understand what I just said. It's uncomparable. When he has chicken, he wants the chicken, he wants the breading, he wants to taste biyachad, and he wants to get it down biyachad because he likes the taste of both of them. So why would it not be mezainis? This is a davar. It's kimat loy muvan. It's kimat loy muvan. I'll read you. I'm sorry, I was in the middle of reading you the Shevet HaLevi, the Rab Moira, but lashon of the Shevet HaLevi. He says, just a moment, sorry. Here. He says, you don't make a mezainis, it's shackle. Da'afa pisha ain't the davek. It's not gluing it. Mikol makam davar mitsupa, something that's just a cover, something that's just a glazed. There's no question what's the yikr and what's the tuffle. Slowly move on. What does Rosh Shlomo Zalman say? Rosh Shlomo Zalman says in the Sefer Birchos Nemen on page 130, Me'achar that the tzipui is nasa l'dabek. Shlomo Zalman had a different schnitzel than us, Rabbi Isai. He said that the schnitzel, the cover, when he went to ask the Rebbetzin said, you know why we put on the covering? To glue it together. Because al yedei the schnitzel, it now gets fried easier and better. Oh, so then for sure, I agree 100% that avad is such a case at shackle. So he says, Hagam, it gives time, but that's not your reason. Rabbi say, I saw many svarim that bring down Rosh Shlomo Zalman, therefore said schnitzel shackle. Rabbi say it's a davar pashut. If you would ask Rosh Shlomo Zalman, he would tell you schnitzel's mezainis. If you would tell him the reason I'm putting in the taste is I want the taste. He said explicitly, Rosh Shlomo Zalman, that the reason why it's a mezainis, a shackle, is because you're not doing it for the taste. He says explicitly. But Berega, you would tell him, I'm doing it for the taste. He would tell you it's mezainis. He says, you're not. You're doing it that it shouldn't burn the pan, which I don't know what that means, but today all the ladies say they're not doing it for that reason. They're doing it to give taste. So if you'd answer Shlomo Zalman what bracha is schnitzel, he would tell you about 100% of shackle. I'm mezainis, excuse me. Rav Elyashiv. So here I'm on thin ice because over here, Rav Elyashiv is quoted in the Yeshurin, in Chelik Gimel, in page 449, saying that Masher Rav Elyashiv brought that schnitzel is mezainis, which is brought down taka in many places. The Chedushay Basra brings down, Scheinberg's the Zechron Levracha's son-in-law, he brings it, and in the Art Scroll book they bring it down. And I myself personally asked Rav Elyashiv in the middle of a shir that he was giving on Brachos, and Rav Elyashiv said that the schnitzel is mezainis. But Manasseh, the Sefer Yeshurin, brings down in Chelik Gimel, page 449, that what is brought from Rav Elyashiv, that it's a mezainis, Yadua shechazer by Maran. Rav Elyashiv is chazer and it's a shahakal. This Rabbi Isai, I only could say that the Yeshurin was printed, this is Chelik Gimel, the Yeshurin, was printed before the shir that I was at. That shir, Rabbi Isai, is brought in the Oris in Brachos Lamed Vavam Abeis in our Sugya. And that Yeshurin was quoted before. So Rav Elyashiv, according to this, Amol said it's mezainis, was chayzer apparently to say it's shackle. And then in the shir, I heard from Rav Elyashiv's mouth that it's mezainis. After the shir, there was a tumult. And this is what they write, recording the notes of that shir, Rabbi Isai, in the Sefer Aris in Brachos Lamed Vavam Abeis. Kol sheyesh by chametz min Dagan, you make on it a mezainis. Ach, in muasi l'dabek, if it's for glue, it's a shackle. Okay, klala shel davar, kol tafshel, that if you put in the dagan, so then tafshel roi lachila. Excuse me. Chashav dagan veinim is battle. Let me skip down a few lines here. We're getting late.
Can you put it up, please?
Ubemis nira shein svar zunachayna kevin just svar legabe dagan. Yeah, I'll read you actually 2 lines before that. Avakasher oichel adam batzer or dagim benifrad mechametz dagim. Guy got the kol davar chashav ula atzmai. So then, line is battle a bracha a meichel. Bemis nira ein svara zunachayna. Kevin shas svara legabe dagan u because it satiates. Therefore,
Page
next
four.
to a klaliistic bracha that patters a coil. Abaisai, Rav Yashiv is introducing us something here, which I want to explain. Abaisai, a person's going to hear this here and it's going to say, what's the bracha on schnitzel? Mezainis, after hearing all the Paiskim, the Beis Yosef, and the Pashab Shan, the Sugya, and the Rashba, and the Rambam, and the Shulchan Aruch, and the Mishabru, and the Mogen Avram, and now we have Rosh Shlomo Zalman, and Pashit, the Chayr, the Brachos of Mezainis. He's going to hear this, and he's going to say, look, but you know what? The Shevet Levi said, Jackal, Lama Li Latzara Zais, I'll make a shackle, no matter what, I'm Yosef if I make a shackle. You know what, Rabbi say? If you make a Mezainis, you say also b'diavad on any food. Over here, Rav Yashiv, a tzugah like that is an interesting thing. The word Baruch Atah Boirei Minim Zaynis is koilol. It means that this thing is being made in me. So therefore, it's more tzugah passed on this food to say, that thing's being made in me. So I'll say Boirei Minim Zaynis. And no matter what you're say with the Baruch Zaynis, unless it's water or salt, of Rav Yashiv, it's more mistaber that it should patter. In kain ein svara lechalek bein mokim she'oichel in the tafshel or b'fnei atzmai. He says, maybe you'll say, yeah, but that's where I held that schnitzel's its own separate layer. He says, he says, he says, even if you want to say that, but here you're certainly getting satiated, like I mentioned originally, Rabbi Isai, that the schnitzel satiates. So he says, and should make a mezainis on it. So he says, L'chein, the guy govna, it would seem to Rav Yashiv the pashtus was it's a mezainis. But he said after the shear, this is what during the shear he said it's a mezainis. After the shear he said, Yareis Hashem, Yikach min atzipoy levad and make a mezainis, and Yikach min abasar levad and make a shackle. That's a tremendous chiddush because you know that when you have two foods, you have to choose if they're eating together. But akapanim, if somebody's going to ask, certainly everyone agrees if it's a thick schnitzel that is brought mamish from all the paiskim, Rav Yashiv, even Rav Belsky, Sechern Levracha, who Taker had a tzad that schnitzel's shackle, but everyone agreed that if it's a thick coating, you zikr make on the mezainis. I think many times, certainly in Eretz Yisrael, the coating is thick, and therefore, by me, it's mamish a pashit a davar that if a person is in a place where he could pater, so halavai, why shouldn't he pater and do like the minig oilam, shakal or something like that? If he has no choice and he has only in front of him a schnitzel and he wants to know what bracha to make, the bracha it's vaday boirei minei mezainis. And he doesn't have to feel guilty because even if he were to make a bread mezainis and he was wrong, he'd be yotzei as it is. Now, if kamina will be that they make an alamechia. So generally, it's not the negeya because you don't eat the flour in a kedei achil's pras. You don't eat the mezainis. But in a chanami, if you eat it within a kedei achil's pras, you would make taken alamechia. What about
a standard American schnitzel? Quite a Rav. What would the Rav say?
So I got to think pashit that it's a mezainis. As long as in every bite you have, I think in the regular standard schnitzels, you have in every bite. But sometimes you have a massive, like in Southern fried chicken, where you swipe off the top and then you eat that, and then you eat the chicken separately. That for sure is going to be a major issue because it's being eaten separately. So I can't say that the chicken, which is 3 forks later, which is totally chicken and not any mezainis, that on that I'm going to make a mezainis and pat of the chicken. So are you talking about Southern fried chicken or are you talking about an American schnitzel?
We can talk about both, but schnitzel is the most important staple food for Jews here. American schnitzel is not as thick. Admittedly, it's not as thick as Eretz Yisrael. Is the Eretz Yisrael schnitzel coating as thick as it was 40 years ago, or it's already American style?
In other words, the coating is not thick?
Not the breadcrumbs, the breadcrumbs.
The breadcrumbs are not thick?
Well, they don't say. They're not as thick here in America as in Eretz Yisrael. I don't know how much thick is thick. American schnitzel, I guess it all depends on the cook. I mean,
I'm borrowed that if you ask the cook, they're saying they're doing it because of the taste. And people like the taste. To me, it's a davar pashit b'yoyser that it's a bari min mezainis. Pashit, it's a mefershim mishnah berurah. If you're doing it for the taste, it's a mefershim.
The Welt makes the shackle here. Am I wrong? The Welt makes the shackle here in America?
The Welt makes a shackle, 100%. This whole shear was coming lafuke that.
No?
100%.
So can I take a poll here? Give us a second. How many people make a shackle, a mezainis on schnitzel? A mezainis. You make him raise your hand if you make him a sinus. We have only 10% of the people who make him a sinus. That doesn't mean they're right.
The minig is definitely to be making a mezainis. If they're being
Shako.
toilet on Rishleim Zalman, then it's Vaday Atoyas. Because when you read Rishleim Zalman inside, he says it's because of the fact that to make sure it doesn't burn the pan. If they're being toilet on Rav Moshe, there's a stira in Rav Moshe, what he said. If they're being toilet on the Shevet Levi, I hear, but the Shevet Levi is a riesige chiddush. Riesige chiddush. It's a tremendous chidushim. The pashtus is Elamai, they're being toilet, probably because, if you make a shackle, whenever you have a suffix, you make a shackle. I don't know if that's necessary over here when the suffix is not such a good suffix, and mezainis you'd be yaitse regardless. So I don't know. I think pashit, you should try to pater. The Yashiv even said you should try to pater, but there's a double pashit that if you can't pater, and he's in a desert island, as we say, right? He's in a desert island, make a mezainis. Make a mezainis. Fried fish would be the same shaila. If it's given for time, it's a very simple thing. Is it going for time? Is it going for satiating? Or is it going to make sure it doesn't burn? If it's going for time, I think fried fish is given for time. Fried fish given for time. That's what Fursha Mishnah Brura by side. Mishnah Brura Sivkot in Zion. If it's given for time, you make him a Zionist. Chiddush. But emes. Manase.
Is there a difference between bread and breadcrumbs and cornflake?
For sure. Cornflakes is shahako for shteitzach. When they're crushed up cornflakes of shteitzach, it's only kol sheish ba mechamishes min dagan. So obviously, everything I'm talking about today is only when we're discussing a mezainis sug a mezainik sug schnitzel.
You think he knows what pretzel chicken is?
Pretzel chicken. This is like a level of taiva that halavai one day.
A level of taiva that you can't even believe.
Halavai one day. They come out now with flake sugar donuts. Don't worry what's going on over here also. Frag nisht. Nish frag.
The kids have been steiged here. They have a chicken with a pretzel. It's fried together with the pretzel log stuck into the chicken. Not just they take pretzel and crumble it out of the chicken. That's the repulsion.
It's in their mouth, and they eat it together.
They eat it together.
If you what you heard today, I'll be Mezainis. But I don't know, that might get into the suffix of the Mishnah Brura that we view it as two separate foods. That I would definitely try to pater.
But it's fried together. How can it be two separate
I understand,
foods?
but even though it's fried together, but it still remains intact. Everything remains intact. It's not etzim. It's still bleibtas as be like an ice cream sandwich, which is a shaila. The way people look at it is a pretzel and a chicken together. So that I hear.
Let's go back. Since the Rav gave us 7 or 8 sources, the minig Yerushalayim is on schnitzel is what?
If I had to say the emes, I would say it's a shahakol, but I'm doing as hard as I can to change that. So in Ramat Shlomo, everywhere I speak, it's mezainis. By the Ingolite of the American Oilam, which I speak everywhere, it's mezainis. So we're getting the roiv. Soon we're almost there. And by the way, by mezainis, you don't need a roiv. That's what you learned in today's sugya. So there's a miyat that's still making a mezainis. That miyat is considered the chashiv, and therefore, by me, it's the ikar.
Okay. What should I say? The minig. I don't know why the minig America is more shakal. Maybe because it was hushes that the coating was so much thinner here than Eretz Yisrael.
But even that, it's still given latam. Ask the Rebbitzin. It's given latam. It's a pella, absolute pella.
The Rambam's lahatimai. The Rav means lahatimai. The lahatimai means tam. What's the word lahatimai mean?
Rabbi Yankov's lashon was that if they're doing it lihatim, but not its own tam, then that's a shackle. Mishmur says,
"But the Rambam, lahatimai."
Yeah.
What does lahatimai mean exactly? What does tam mean?
Tam means giving tam. Push it. It's a pelik dikamaisa. Pelik dikamaisa. The Mishnah Brura. That's our Rebbe. Mishnah Brura says, "Kevan du ba lehatim." So there are those that bring a meiri. To me, the pella. The Miri is true. The Miri is not like everything you heard today. But the Miri is against the Rash. But the Miri is against the Beis Yosef. The Miri is against all the Paiskim. It's a Pella. It's an absolute Pella. Pella.
And what about this far they quote from Moshe that it's for only Hachana Ba'alma?
Forget it. If it's there just for the Hachana purposes, then Moshe would agree in today's Mitzias that they're not doing it for the Hachana purposes. They're doing it to give taste. That means Moshe would agree. And that's what the Revivus Ephraim brought down.
The Farm seems to be implying that Ramesha held that all schnitzel is for achana purposes, right? That's what he
But
said.
it's not a Shiloh for Moshe. The Avnei Nezer asked his mother. It's a Shiloh for the
You have to ask the
Rebbe.
mother.
You got to ask the mother.
Okay.
Everybody here has to ask their mother, their wife, their daughter, somebody, all the women in your life. What's the reason why? Rav Nissen Zechron of the Bracha writes that it's totally in the maker. That's interesting. It's not totally in the oichel, the person who's eating it. He says it'll be totally in the person that's making it. That's tam interesting idea. Rav Nissen's in page 205. He says we go after the mif'al, heim kovim, and the oichlim, the people that eat it, are saimach on them. So you got to ask. You can't ask the rabbanim. You got to ask the mama. I asked my wife.
Got to go into the
do it?
kitchen. Yeah. Every time it's chal, every single time you got to go into the kitchen and ask the lady what her shem yichud kavana was when she made the schnitzel.
By schnitzel, I don't think you have to go in every time. I think it's push it every time. I think everyone's doing it for taste. Everyone likes the taste of schnitzel. Push it. I mean, it's push it.
Okay.